Welcome to WhoDooTV.
I'm Jared.
I'm Hooser. And today we're going to be talking about Harbinger Vol.1, the relaunch of 2012 version with writer Joshua Dysart. Cool. Thanks for coming back to us, guys. Today we're talking about Harbinger, the 2012 version, relaunched by Valiant, written by Joshua Dysart. Some great artists in it. I'm a huge Valiant fan. This is one of my favorite books. And I got Jared to read this book, and we kind of want to just go over Volume 1 with you guys and kind of go from there, see what somebody who brand new to Valiant kind of thought of the book. So, Jared, what'd you think, or do you want to give us an update on what you saw? Or?
Yeah. So I honestly didn't know what I was getting into. Like, I didn't know what this was about. So yeah, Hoosier comes to me, he tells me I need to read Harbinger, and like, that could mean a whole bunch of things, but it was awesome. Like, it's very much kind of like almost X-Men-esque in a way, with like more extreme powers and like more powerful characters and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun, a lot of like, not intrigue. What's the word I'm looking for?
It's definitely hooking. A lot of Harbinger, it bases a lot of the Valiant universe about psiots, or people with a like a telepathic power. So Valiant likes to have their world be about like what could possibly happen outside our door, what could happen outside our window, and maybe we just haven't figured out how to really work the powers our mind has. And that's part of what Valiant does. This book introduces us to Peter Stanchek, 18-year-old kid who has got some problems.
Yeah, he's really messed up.
Yeah.
Like, I was a little surprised at some of the things he did, but I guess like in real life, if like some teenage kid like has these types of powers that he does, like,
yeah,
it's, I mean, I guess like why not? Like,
right.
I mean, it's like right in the beginning, so it's not much of a spoiler, but like he can like control people's minds, so he like tells his pharmacist just to give him all these drugs, and like he goes and like enjoys it. But I mean, there is some reasoning behind it and everything too, so he's not just a junkie, but
right. Well, it's really weird. In the beginning of the book, we meet Toyo Harada, a young Toyo Harada, and Toyo ends up going into this unknown place, and he gets attacked by a army, and then just basically obliterates him in like a second. And he randomly meets this guy called the Bleeding Monk, and he calls Toyo the Harbinger. And you know, for a little history, Harbinger is the person who brings news. He is a future person to bring news, and typically it's bad news is what Harbinger really means, is from the definitions I got from it. So it's I was kind of wondering why they went with that name. And then it goes to Peter, and we see Peter just hearing all these voices, and he asks for, give me your benzos, give me whatever, to the pharmacist, and then he like wipes the guy's brain. And he meets his friend Joe, Joe is one of Pete's psych hospital escapees.
Yeah, he's like a schizo friend who's like, he's way more messed up than Pete, like mentally anyways.
Right, he's got a legitimate mental health problem.
Yeah. So it's an interesting relationship between them. They pretty much just bonded through through their hospital experience, and then helping each other get out of it.
Well, and really from later on, you start realizing a lot of people are really scared of Pete, and Joe was like one of the only people not scared of him.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's one reason why Pete has this like protection over him, like a little brother almost. And then Pete is like, he's best friends with Joe, because say everybody else seems to be scared of Pete.
Right. Joe's kind of like the only person Pete has.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we move on with these guys. They go to Pittsburgh, which turns out to be Pete's hometown, and they go to the neighborhood he came from, whatnot, and they're kind of on the run. They hint towards people following them, and Pete runs across Chris Hathaway, one of his friends when they were like 10 years old. That it shows them kissing behind the tool shed or whatnot, and Chris has just got this crush on her. She wants nothing to do with him.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, she in fact, she pretty much just like ignores his or denies his existence, not just ignores him. Right. She just kind of tells him, "I don't know who the heck you are."
Right? Well, and then later he ends up getting to meet her more, and she's basically admits everybody was scared of you. You did things to people that, you know, the whole neighborhood was scared of you.
Yeah, yeah. So it's a really fascinating story, and the characters definitely seem much more three-dimensional. There's a lot more going on than just kind of like your typical, you know, characters of like, here's this guy with ultimate powers, you know, kind of like the Superman of like, you know, only do good and like stuff like that.
It's what I really connected with the book because it's a flawed character from the beginning, and it really talks about what somebody that's struggling with. You know, and so it makes it like it possibly is something that could happen out our window, right, when we open the door. Moving on the book, still on the first issue, Joe gets arrested, and Joe gets to have a interview with somebody named Mr. Toll.
Yeah.
Mr. Toll they call him Dole Toll, and then Joe tells about how Pete's wiped his brain so many times that he's dull, he's got nothing, he's lame brain.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of just emotionless, you know, suit kind of, and he leads this group, Project Rising Spirit. Right. And we don't really know their intentions, but they're kind of like they're chasing after, at least in this book, which is pretty much the only one I've read yet. They're chasing after Pete and Joe for some reason. And
Pete has no idea he's Project Rising Spirit yet.
That's a good point.
Right.
That's a good point.
They just think that there's a guy, Mr. Toll, who's chasing him down at this point.
Yeah, yeah. It's right. So he's kind of just this. He's kind of the spook, you know. He's the guy who's got people around every corner, like, you know, watching these guys and like trying to pick them up and stuff.
And we get to the next piece, and it's one of the reasons I love Valiant, because they're not scared to do controversial things. What happens I don't approve of in the book, but it is really like
you can appreciate their boldness.
Yeah, they're trying to do things that are original, that are, you know what I mean, they're not scared to do it. Especially a company that just relaunched at this time, you know what I mean, they got all this into it and they decided to do this. And so Pete obviously saw him at this pharmacy. He had the ability to tell the pharmacist, like, hey, you're doing this for me and you're forgetting about it. So he's got this mind control thing. Yeah, do you want to tell him what happens?
I mean, I kind of couldn't believe it, I guess, in a way. So again, he's like a normal kid, or as normal as you can get, and who's got these powers to make people do what he wants them to do, and you know, he's pretty much crushing on this girl, tells her to fall in love with him, and you know, under his spell, I guess, ends up sleeping with her. And
right. I mean, in a way, it's pretty much rape.
It was.
I hate to say it.
I mean, that was kind of a jarring spot. It's not violent, but you know, the subject of it is pretty crazy. Yeah. But I mean, like, they are bold in being able to do that, and like not shying away from that, I guess. So that was kind of an interesting piece in that, and it also. I mean, it definitely like showed more of Pete's character as well, like what he's willing to do, or at least like where he's starting out in this story, you know. So it was interesting. So yeah,
and you really look at it too as character. I mean, he's a lost guy. He's with Joe, who's like the only guy who's not scared of him. Chris is his childhood crush that he loved. And it just, I really got, like, I didn't like what he did, but you get this idea that he's just really wanting somebody to love him, somebody to care for him. You know what I mean? With this powers that have pushed people away. Yeah. That you really get this vibe that he wants somebody to care for him and love him.
Yeah. He's desperately needing kind of to belong.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Then we move forward on it. Joe's getting questioned by Mr. Toll, and they basically just tell him, you're worthless, we're not chasing you anymore, you gone, forget it. And then Pete wakes up from sleeping with Chris, and there's a dog outside talking to him. And the dog basically says, "You can see me, look further, look further." And Pete ends up going like into the dog almost. And he comes in to meet Toyo Harada, who we met at the very beginning of the book, and gets a projection of this beautiful like Japanese garden.
Yeah, the cherry blossoms are falling. And
the art's still pretty awesome on it.
Yeah, the art is pretty cool in this movie.
Yeah. And Toyo ends up telling Pete how he's not alone. You are a Psyot. And he kind of explains how people, there's norms in this world that are, they don't have any powers. They're just normal people. And then there's Latents. Latents have the ability to be a Psyot, but they do not know it most of the time, and they need to be activated. And then he lets him know that there's a very, very few people that are born activated. Toyo kind of says, at this point, he says it's him. We'll later learn that he's lying and he wasn't born activated, and that Pete is also somebody who was born activated.
Yeah.
And Toyo's just really trying to talk Pete into joining him with this commune or whatnot that he has called the Harbinger Foundation. And the Harbinger Foundation is people like Pete, where they are learning to control their powers.
And this is kind of where I got the X-Men vibe from it, you know. It's kind of like he's bringing people together and like creating this group and like trying to teach them to control their powers.
Right, trying to do the Xavier School.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't get... That's probably about where it stops, though.
Oh, really? Further on, like it...
I mean, well, Toyo Harada is definitely not Professor X.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
We learned that. And then we learn Joe decides to come back, and he sees Pete talking to a dog and sees some hot chicks sitting in the living room. But Joe, not being the brightest, ended up bringing along Project Rising Spirit, Mr. Toll's group. Seems like a SWAT team at this point. They chop her in and they get Pete.
Yeah, it's pretty intense. There's a lot of moving parts in this story. It's and that was kind of like the whole first issue within the volume here.
It's an action-packed first issue. I mean, that's something Valiant does, is they have more pages than most other books, and I believe that was one of the bigger first issues. Yeah,
I mean, it introduced every character. It kind of or most characters, most important characters, I guess.
Right.
It really helped. It was really good at laying down the foundation of like what's to come. Like, here's all the different players in kind of the larger picture.
Right.
Even though there's like more characters and everything that are more specific that it gets to later on. Like overall, I mean, you have the Harbinger Foundation, you have the Project Rising Spirit, and then you have like Pete and like what he's about there.
Right.
So
Chris, Pete, and Joe, they're all being swarmed by the SWAT team in issue 2, and Toyo basically projected through the dog, tells you know what to do it, Pete. Let's see what you do. And Pete just knocks out a SWAT team all in a swoop, knocks down a helicopter. He erases Mr. Toll's mind again. He ends up going off into with the Harbinger Foundation to do that, and meanwhile he releases Chris from his spell he gave her, and she is pissed. She's ready to kill him.
Absolutely unhappy.
She is pissed. But Pete really cares. He's like, I want her taken care of, and I want to have Joe have a house over his roof. Then I'll go with you. And so they agree to do that. He gets told about Project Rising Spirits, how they are a government foundation hunting psyops. So it's kind of interesting. Meanwhile, that's kind of really what it seems like Harbinger Renegades is doing too, with his recruiters. Then later on, we get to see Harbor Global Conglomerates, which is Toyo Harada is one of the big, wealthy, like 1% people in the world. He owns so much. And we kind of learned that he knows the Bleeding Monk, and the Bleeding Monk can predict the future, and he can kind of see the projections of where the future is going.
Yeah.
We also meet a good character within the universe called Livewire. She is awesome. They're about to have a new book called Secret Weapons. It's going to be her as one of the main characters.
Oh, cool.
But she's one of Harada's
awesome.
left-hand man, whatnot. She has the ability to control machines with her mind. That's her her psyop powers.
Mm-hmm.
Toyo ends up going to the Bleeding Monk, and one thing the Bleeding Monk calls Peter is the Great Destroyer.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy that can see the future is calling him the Great Destroyer. So there's a lot of foreshadowing in this book. We learn Peter gets, mind controlled by Ingrid, who's one of the psychologists at the Harbinger Foundation, and they see some of the torment he went through as a kid, where he was picked on in school.
Yeah.
Where he tried to activate his father through mind control and ends up pretty much killing his father, is what it seems like. Then he goes to the hospital. He gets, electrotherapy on his head. And it gets pretty interesting. You can see that he went through a lot of issues as a child. And that's basically episode 2 and 3 really quick. I mean, there's a lot more density into it. And then you get into 4, we meet somebody named Faith. And people will learn about Faith, and they will love Faith. She's an awesome character. One thing that's pretty shown is that she is a plus-size woman. She's overweight, but she is the most positive person that you can see.
She's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ever come across any sort of Valiant titles these days, I've actually was aware of Faith before I got into this. She's got her own title and everything like that, and she's one of their biggest titles, I believe.
Right now she is. She's very popular.
So she's an awesome character. She's just super fun. She's a total nerd, and it's I don't know. I can relate to the things that she's into, and the way that Dysart brings her in, though, it's not heavy-handed that she's a nerd, or
right.
I mean, she's totally bringing up all these references and stuff, but it doesn't feel like he's trying too hard to make her a nerd. It feels very natural, and she's just a character that you read her and you just enjoy her. You enjoy who she is, and it's a lot of fun.
Right. And this goes back and forth into the Harbinger Foundation, where Pete's just having a hard time getting along with the people at the school. One thing that the people at the school didn't like about Pete is that he was born activated. And when you get activated, you go through a serious procedure, and they say it's very painful, and 1 in 4 people that go through it end up dying.
Yeah.
And so these people have this grudge over Pete because he's already activated.
Yeah, you didn't have to go through that.
Right. There's parts of this where one of the Hidden Moon, basically the dean of the school, tells Toyo, we need to kill him, not train him, talking about Pete. So another foreshadowing of things to come with them. Toyo lies to the Bleeding Monk lies to the people about what the Bleeding Monk says, and it's just interesting. Toyo and Pete start talking together again, and this is one where we learn that Toyo tells Pete that he was not activated until he went through the nuclear bomb at Hiroshima.
Right.
But Toyo also says that nobody else really knows that. He has not told that to people. Everybody thinks he was a born psyop. Like I say, and there's very few that were born psyops. We learned that Toyo's also not hunting, but they're looking for more psyops. They are following 500 plus Laytons, and that's where we see them pick up Faith. And they kind of recruited Faith, and then they basically tell Pete about this activation process, and they learn that Pete tried to activate his father at one time, and they go in and they get Pete to activate Faith.
Yeah, but it doesn't. It's you don't know that it's successful immediately.
Right.
It kind of looks like a botched job, you know, and Pete pulls away. He's like, I can't do this right now, I'm hurting her and everything like that. And it's interesting.
Yeah. During this whole thing, Pete's getting this weird vibes over Toyo the whole time. He didn't expect it to be some big business that it was. He was expecting it to be like a farm, like a commune, to learn, like a boys' ranch. And he keeps getting this vibe. And there's times where he calls Peter calls Toyo like he's got a god complex. Peter starts getting these weird projections of Joe again. We get back to Joe. He starts getting these projections of Joe.
And he starts just showing up in his apartment, and I mean, it's not him; it's his projection, but it's just kind of crazy.
Right. And then Pete ends up skipping out of the Harbinger Foundation, and Livewire helps him out. She controls the machine, so she cuts down the all of the security.
Yeah, but she kind of only helped him out because like she didn't want him there.
You can see that she's kind of got this vibe that I feel like you kind of get the hints that she knows something's up with Toyo too.
Totally.
And then Pete goes and he looks for Joe. He ends up finding Chris, and Chris helps him find Joe. And Joe is found dead in like basically a crack heroin house, just dead. And he goes crazy. Ingrid gets there, Hidden Moon gets there, and he basically beats the crap out of both of them. He wipes Ingrid's mind to figure out that Toyo sent Stronghold to go to kill Joe.
Yeah.
And this just sets Peter off. And he goes and he runs after Harada. He goes straight to Harbinger, the Harbinger global conglomerates. And he goes after him. And then Livewire figures out which Stronghold is like her boyfriend, what it seems like.
Yeah.
She figures out he killed Joe, and she's pissed.
So, yeah, totally.
So Pete's fighting with Toyo. And then Livewire gets back involved, and she turns on Toyo. And she gets some of the robotic drones to shoot Toyo.
Yeah, like the turrets and stuff that's protecting the conglomerate.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Pete's he's pretty much beaten up pretty bad. And he's just basically, I don't want to live in a world like this anyway. This world sucks, for lack of better terms.
Yeah.
And he didn't want to be with Toyo, and so he basically just jumps off the roof in a way, or falls off the roof. And and then all of a sudden here comes Swoop, and it's Faith. Faith saves him, and she's hilarious. She's why didn't you give me a better power to be like strong too, not just fly? So we learn that she can fly, and that's pretty much where it leaves off, where it's just Pete and Faith kind of off on their own. And what's next?
It's a fun story, and like I said, I definitely want to continue with it and see where it goes. And
sweet.
So thank you for bringing this title into my life.
Oh, yeah.
Now another comic to collect. And
and one thing, I went ahead and I bought the deluxe edition on this one. Mm-hmm. The deluxe edition, on Amazon, is $25. It's worth trying it out versus buying 3 different titles.
Yeah.
I'll put a link below if you guys want to check that out. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Outside of that, I enjoy it. I want to do all of the volumes and keep going. I look forward to doing the new Harbinger Renegade title too.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, that one sounds awesome.
Yep. All right, guys. Well, don't forget to hit subscribe if you like what you're hearing,
and the like button if you truly do like what you're hearing.
And always remember, we want to do what you guys want us to do. So go ahead and hit us up in the comments, or if there's something you want us to read, definitely put us down and below. We'll cover it. Or at Twitter at WhoDooTV.
Yep. We're on all sorts of platforms. So.
All right. Well, thanks for watching WhoDooTV.
Thank you.